African woman accidentally hits the luxury car of an Arab billionaire. She never expected this reaction. She was just trying to make it through another hard day. The sun was unforgiving, and the weight of 2 jobs and endless responsibilities sat heavy on her shoulders. As she drove her old, beaten-up car through the crowded city streets, all she wanted was to get home to her little apartment and forget the chaos of the world. But fate had a very different plan. The sound of metal crunching against metal shattered her thoughts. Her heart dropped. She had just bumped into the back of a sleek, black Rolls-Royce, the kind of car she had only seen in magazines. Her hands trembled as she stepped out of her car, terrified of what kind of powerful man would step out of the luxury vehicle. What happened next? It wasn't anger. It wasn't threats. It was something so unexpected, so life-changing. It would shake the very foundation of her world. Before we begin, make sure to subscribe to the channel, like this video, and turn on notifications. This helps us bring more inspiring stories like this to you. Trust me, you don't want to miss what happens next in this unbelievable journey of connection, courage, and a chance encounter that rewrote both of their lives. The traffic light turned yellow, but Amina didn't slow down. Her eyes darted to the dashboard. The gas tank needle was flirting with empty. She couldn't afford to miss another shift. Her second job started in 15 minutes, and her boss had already warned her. One more late punch-in and that's it. No more chances. Her fingers clutched the steering wheel of her old Toyota Corolla, the same one she'd bought second-hand 5 years ago when she arrived in the city. The air conditioner didn't work. The passenger door was dented. The check engine light had been on for weeks. But it moved. That was enough. She was about to turn onto the main boulevard when it happened. A moment of hesitation. A man stepping off the sidewalk unexpectedly. A flash of sunlight in her eyes. And suddenly, her foot slammed the brakes too late. Crack. The sickening crunch of metal on metal echoed through the air. She froze. Her heart pounded. She looked in the rearview mirror, then out the windshield. In front of her was a car that didn't belong on this street, not in this neighborhood. A jet-black Rolls-Royce, gleaming like obsidian under the sun, motionless. Except for the light scratch and dent, now marring its flawless bumper. Amina's breath caught in her throat. People on the sidewalk turned. A few pulled out phones. Others simply stared. She wanted to disappear. The driver's door of the Rolls-Royce opened. Her stomach twisted into knots. From the car stepped a man dressed in a perfectly tailored gray suit. His skin was sun-kissed bronze, his beard precisely trimmed, his presence magnetic and unmissable. He didn't wear a tie, and yet every part of him screamed power, wealth, control. Amina stood frozen, not knowing what to say. She braced herself for shouting. Insults, maybe even the police. Instead, silence. He looked at her, his gaze unreadable. He didn't even glance at the damage. "I'm so sorry," she finally managed, her voice barely a whisper. "I didn't see. It was my fault. I'll find a way to pay." He didn't speak. Amina's throat tightened. "Please, don't call the police. I have a daughter. I can't afford—" He lifted a hand calmly, stopping her mid-sentence. His voice was deep, smooth, with the kind of quiet authority that silenced entire boardrooms. "What's your name?" She blinked. That was the last thing she expected him to ask. "Amina," she replied, confused. "Amina Yusuf." He nodded slowly, his eyes studying her as if trying to read something beyond her words. Behind him, a security guard emerged from the passenger side, but the man raised a finger. "Stay." "I'm not calling anyone," he said softly. "Accidents happen. Are you okay?" She stared at him, lips parted. "Yes, I'm fine, but your car, I don't know how I'll—" He interrupted again, not with harshness, but with calm resolve. "You don't need to worry about the car." She didn't know whether to cry or laugh. Was this some trick? Was he trying to humiliate her publicly? "Why?" she asked, voice cracking. "Why are you being kind?" He studied her face again. "Because I can see when someone is fighting a bigger war than a fender bender." He handed her his card. Zaid Al-Karim, Executive Chairman, Al-Karim Global Holdings. A name she had heard before, in magazines, on the news, whispered in business circles. He was a billionaire, oil, tech, logistics, the kind of man whose decisions shaped entire industries. "I want you to come to my office tomorrow morning," he said. 10 o'clock. Amina stared at him like he'd just asked her to fly to the moon. "But why?" He tilted his head. "Let's just say I believe in fate, and you just crashed into mine." He got back into his car, the door clicking shut like nothing had happened. As the Rolls-Royce pulled away from the curb, leaving her in the middle of the street, card still trembling in her hand, Amina realized she hadn't even taken a full breath since the moment she hit his car. She looked down at the card again. Zaid Al-Karim. She didn't know it yet, but her life would never be the same. And what waited behind the doors of that office was something she never could have imagined. Amina barely slept. The business card rested beside her pillow like some strange artifact from another universe. She had turned it over in her fingers again and again, hoping it would make more sense in the morning. It didn't. If anything, the polished white card with black embossed letters seemed even more surreal in the soft light of dawn. She wore her best clothes, which meant the same blouse she saved for job interviews, and walked into the heart of the city, where glass towers pierced the clouds and people wore shoes that cost more than her rent. Her feet ached by the time she reached the building. She didn't belong here. Not in this world of polished marble, brushed gold elevators, and quiet, confident people who didn't flinch at a security check. "Name?" the receptionist asked without looking up. "Amina Yusuf. I have an appointment." The woman looked up, paused, then typed quickly. "You're on the list, 42nd floor. Mr. Al-Karim is expecting you." Amina could hardly believe it. The elevator ride felt endless, each ding like a drumbeat in her chest. When the doors opened, she was met with silence. A hallway draped in minimalist luxury. Everything was white, gray, and gold. Soothing, intimidating. There was no secretary, no noise. Just a single frosted glass wall with a brass handle. She hesitated, then pushed it open. And there he was. Zaid Al-Karim stood at a window that stretched from floor to ceiling, looking out at the skyline like it was his own chessboard. He didn't turn around when she entered. "You came," he said simply. Amina swallowed. "You asked me to." He turned then, the same commanding presence as before, but in daylight, something about him felt heavier. Not cruel, not arrogant, but burdened, like a man carrying more than wealth and power. Something human. "I'm glad," he said, motioning for her to sit. The chair was velvet, soft, and absurdly comfortable. Amina sat cautiously, her hands in her lap. "I need to ask," she said quietly. "Why am I here?" He didn't answer right away. He sat across from her, folding his hands, as if weighing something invisible. "I had a sister once," he said suddenly. "Her name was Yasmin." Amina blinked. The room fell still. "She died 5 years ago," Zaid continued, his voice even but edged with something raw. "Hit by a car. The driver left the scene. We never found them." Amina didn't speak. She couldn't. "She looked like you," he said finally. Same eyes, same expression when she was trying to stay strong. Amina felt a tightness in her throat. "I'm sorry." Zaid nodded slowly. "So when I saw you standing there, scared, apologizing for something that didn't matter to me, I knew I couldn't walk away." A long silence passed. "I don't need money," Amina said, voice cracking. "If this is about pity, I don't want it." Zaid looked at her, something like a smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. "This isn't about pity. It's about recognition. You crashed into my car. Yes. But maybe you were sent for something else." "Like what?" He leaned forward slightly. "Come work for me." Her heart stopped. "What?" "You said you're working 2 jobs. Let me help. I own dozens of companies. I can place you somewhere that pays well, gives you time with your daughter, a fresh start." I don't know anything about business. You know survival, he said. That's more than most people in this building. Amina stared at him, her chest rising and falling too fast. Why would you do this for me? He hesitated. Because I never got to help Yasmin. And because I saw something in you I can't ignore. She looked down at her hands. They were trembling. What if I fail? She whispered. Zaid stood and walked to his desk. He picked up a small silver key and placed it in front of her. Then you get up and try again. This opens the employee entrance downstairs. You'll find a woman named Layla there tomorrow morning at 8. She'll walk you through everything. Amina couldn't breathe. Her world had flipped in less than 24 hours. And then, just as she stood up to leave, he said something that made her stop cold at the door. Oh, and Amina. She turned. Don't thank me yet, Zaid said, his eyes unreadable. The hardest part hasn't even begun. Amina barely recognized herself in the mirror that morning. The circles under her eyes had softened. Her posture was straighter, less guarded, and for the first time in what felt like forever, she didn't dread the hours ahead. Still, as she arrived at the grand building again, key in hand, a part of her feared it had all been a dream, or worse, a trap. She used the silver key Zaid had given her, pushing open a discreet side entrance that bypassed the chaos of the main lobby. It led to a private hallway, quiet and carpeted, with soft lighting that made the entire place feel like a secret kept from the rest of the city. A woman stood waiting at the end of the hall. She wore a navy blue hijab and a perfectly tailored blazer, her expression calm but focused. You must be Amina, she said with a kind smile. I'm Layla. Mr. Al-Karim asked me to onboard you personally. Amina blinked. Personally? Layla nodded. You're not just another employee here. You're someone he sees potential in. Let's not waste it. They moved through a maze of offices, some empty, others bustling with quiet energy. Everyone seemed polished, driven, and completely at ease in their roles. Amina felt like an imposter in a dream, until they reached a wide room with a long conference table and screens lining the walls. This is your training hub, Layla said. You'll learn everything here. Finance systems, internal tools, protocols. You'll shadow me for a few weeks. I don't have a degree, Amina whispered, unsure. You have experience life doesn't teach in classrooms, Layla replied. That's why you're here. And just like that, Amina was pulled into a whirlwind. Days passed in a blur of unfamiliar terms, sharp deadlines, and long hours shadowing Layla. She made mistakes. She fumbled, but she learned. What surprised her more than anything was Zaid. He didn't hover. He didn't check in often. But when he passed through the halls, tall, calm, exuding quiet authority, he would always glance in her direction, just a second longer than necessary, as if he were making sure she was still standing. And she was. Barely. One Thursday evening, after everyone had left, Amina stayed behind. She was working on a report for Layla, determined not to fall behind. She hadn't noticed that the light in Zaid's office was still on, until he appeared beside her. "You're still here?" he said quietly. She looked up, startled. "I wanted to finish this." "I'm slow. I know." He held up a hand. "You're not slow. You're determined. That matters more to me." She hesitated. "Why me, Zaid? Really? Why help a stranger when you could ignore me like everyone else?" He walked to the window, hands in his pockets. "Because when I look at you, I remember where I came from." Amina tilted her head. "You were never poor." "No," he said, "but I was invisible. Even with all the money, all the legacy, no one saw me. Not really. You crashed into my life, and you didn't care about my name, my car, my empire. You were afraid, not of me, but of failing the people who depend on you." His voice dropped to a whisper. "I understand that more than you know." Silence hung between them. "I still don't know what you want from me," she said. Zaid turned to her. "Maybe I don't either, but I know I'm not finished watching you rise." And then he left her alone in the quiet. The next day, everything changed. Amina arrived at the office to find the atmosphere different, tense. Whispers echoed through the corridors. Layla met her in the hallway, her eyes wide. "There was a break-in," she said, "at one of our overseas branches. Confidential files stolen. Zaid's under pressure like never before. There's talk of betrayal. Someone from inside." Amina's stomach dropped. "You think someone here?" Layla nodded grimly. "And the board's looking at everyone, including those Zaid brought in personally." Amina's chest tightened. She had just found her place, a chance, a beginning, and now she might lose everything. Because what she didn't know was that her name had already been placed at the top of a list of suspects. Amina sat frozen in her chair, the buzz of the office around her now sounding like static. People walked past her desk, their voices lowered, their eyes darting nervously. She felt it. That shift, that cold distance, as if she'd suddenly become radioactive. Amina Yusuf. From the street to the 42nd floor, to now being suspected of betrayal. She didn't even know what was stolen. How could she be a suspect? She stood up, her legs weak beneath her, and went to find Layla. The assistant director was typing rapidly in her office, 2 phones ringing in the background. "Layla," Amina said, breathless. "I don't understand. What's happening? Why would my name be on any list?" Layla paused. Her expression was tight, tired. "Because Zaid brought you in without protocol. No interviews, no clearance, no background checks." Amina's voice cracked. "So that makes me a criminal?" "No," Layla said softly. It makes you vulnerable. These people, the board, the advisors, they don't like surprises. And you're the biggest surprise of all. Amina stepped back, stunned. I came here to work, to prove myself. I know that, Layla replied. But right now, truth doesn't matter as much as perception. She wanted to scream. After everything, the sacrifice, the courage it took to walk into this world she didn't belong to. Now they were turning on her without evidence. I need to talk to Zaid, she said. He'll clear this up. But Layla's face told her everything. He's not seeing anyone right now, she said. He's under immense pressure. He left for Abu Dhabi this morning. Emergency board meeting. Gone. Just like that. Amina left the office early, her heart a storm of confusion. She walked the city for hours, past places she used to clean, buildings she never dared enter. Now, her feet dragged with the weight of betrayal, not by Zaid, not yet, but by the world she thought she was finally part of. When she got home, her daughter, Mariam, ran into her arms, not knowing her mother's world was collapsing again. That night, Amina couldn't sleep. She opened her old laptop and started researching everything she could about Al-Karim Holdings, scandals, mergers, recent cyber breaches, leaks. Names floated across the screen. Competitors, former executives, lawsuits quietly buried. And then, something strange. An anonymous blog post, posted just hours after the leak. It spoke about a woman brought in through unofficial channels who had access to sensitive documents without the board's approval. They were feeding the narrative, shaping it, and someone inside wanted her gone. Suddenly, her phone buzzed. A message. Unknown. Number. You should never have touched his life. Now watch it burn. Her blood turned to ice. She jumped to her feet and locked the door. Her hands shook. This wasn't just about suspicion. Someone was targeting her, personally. She didn't know what scared her more. That someone thought she was capable of betraying Zaid, or that someone wanted her destroyed because she wasn't. And still, no word from Zaid. 2 days passed, no contact. Until the third night, when a knock came at her door. It was after midnight. She peeked through the peephole, and her breath caught. Zaid, standing alone, in a black coat, eyes darker than she had ever seen them. She opened the door slowly. I didn't think I'd see you again, she whispered. He stepped inside, without a word. The silence between them throbbed like a heartbeat. I had to go, he finally said, voice low. The board was tearing the company apart. I needed to protect what I built. And me? She asked, her voice trembling. You left me to burn. His eyes met hers. I never stopped watching. He reached into his coat and pulled out a folder. Confidential documents. He set them down on her table. You're not just a suspect, he said. You're the key. Amina stared at him, confused. Whoever did this, they used your login, your identity, and I know it wasn't you. Her heart raced. Then who was it? Zaid looked her dead in the eyes. I don't know yet, but we're going to find out. Together. Zaid's words hung in the air like a match struck in the dark. You're the key. Amina stared at the folder lying between them on the small kitchen table. It felt out of place, official, expensive, dangerous, like someone had dropped a loaded weapon onto her safe space. Mariam was asleep in the next room, just behind that door, while the man who ruled entire industries sat in silence across from her, his jaw tense, his hands resting on his knees like he was preparing for war. She opened the folder slowly. Inside were screenshots of access logs, timestamps, file names she didn't recognize, contracts, trade route data, energy bids, and her name. Amina Yusuf. Access granted. Again and again. At times, she wasn't even in the building. Her voice trembled. This says I accessed documents I've never even heard of. Zaid nodded. The system was manipulated. Someone cloned your credentials, used your ID as a shield. But why me? Because you're new, unprotected. Someone they assumed I wouldn't defend. She looked up at him. But you are. I am, he said quietly. He stood and began to pace her small apartment, his presence almost too big for the room. His coat swept behind him like a shadow. They thought choosing you would make it easier to pin the blame, but they made a mistake. They underestimated your will. Amina felt a strange mix of fear and strength in her chest. It was the first time in weeks she didn't feel helpless. So what now? She asked. Zaid turned, his eyes sharper than she'd ever seen them. Now, we bait them. Bait them. We don't report this yet. Not to the board, not to the press. We give them time to think they've won. Meanwhile, I bring you closer. Amina blinked. Closer? He nodded. I'm moving you to my private office. You'll work directly under me now. She stood abruptly, almost knocking over the chair. Zaid, that'll make it worse. Everyone already thinks. They already think it, Amina. So let them. Let them watch. Let them talk, while we pull the thread from the inside. His voice wasn't angry. It was focused, calculated, like a man used to navigating storms without blinking. She took a deep breath. "What do you need from me?" "Loyalty," he said simply, "and courage." Amina nodded. The next morning, she walked into the 42nd floor not as a suspect, but as his assistant. The shift was immediate. Eyes followed her. Conversation stopped when she entered a room. Layla looked at her with something between concern and warning. Even the elevator rides felt longer, tighter, as if the walls were pressing in. But she stood tall. She walked in Zaid's shadow now, and she'd learn how to cast her own. Days passed, each one heavier than the last. Zaid worked endlessly, digging into digital trails, old contracts, remote server access. Amina learned to read signs in silence, his clenched jaw, the way he'd suddenly pause mid-call, the look he gave when someone passed by too confidently. And then, one afternoon, everything cracked open. Amina was sorting through archived employee files, an old digital directory Zaid had granted her access to just in case. Most of the names meant nothing to her, until one did. Reem Khalil, former IT director, resigned 8 months ago. Last known login, 3 weeks ago. Her heart skipped. She pulled up internal reports, security flags, anything she could find. And there it was. A quiet request to reinstate her access for consulting reasons, signed off not by Zaid, but by someone on the board. Amina rushed into his office. "She never left," she said, breathless. "Reem, she's still in the system. They used her to mask everything." Zaid looked up, then slowly rose from his chair. "Who approved her access?" Amina handed him the file. He studied the digital signature. His face went still. "Mahmoud," he whispered. "Who is that?" "One of my father's oldest allies," Zaid replied. "A board member I trusted without question." Amina felt cold all over. So it wasn't just a breach. It was a betrayal. He nodded. "And now we know who we're up against." But just as he said it, his phone lit up on the desk. "Private calling." Zaid answered, and the voice on the other end was shaking. "Sir, I don't know how to say this, but your private home in Riyadh, it's been broken into." Zaid froze. And there was a message spray-painted across the wall. Amina leaned in, heart pounding. "What did it say?" Zaid asked. The man on the phone swallowed hard. "She dies next." Amina's knees gave out the second she heard the words. "She dies next." Zaid ended the call, his face pale but controlled. Amina's eyes welled up, her voice breaking. "They're coming for me?" "No," he said firmly, stepping closer. "They're trying to scare me. And they think threatening you will make me fold." She shook her head. "Zaid, this isn't business anymore. This is personal. This is war." His jaw tightened. "Then we fight back." That night, he moved her and Mariam to a private, undisclosed apartment guarded by men he trusted with his life. No press, No phone calls, just silence, strategy, and safety. But inside that silence, a fire had started to burn. Zaid confronted the board with everything. Reem's reactivation, the falsified documents, and Mahmoud's signature. At first, they denied. Then, they deflected. But when he played the security footage, a shaky clip of Mahmoud speaking with Reem in a hotel lobby, the room went still. Mahmoud stood up. "You brought her into our world," he said coldly. "You let her distract you. You let your feelings compromise you." Zaid stared at him. "And you underestimated her. That was your biggest mistake." He fired Mahmoud on the spot. And just like that, Amina's name was cleared. But the damage, the scars, they wouldn't fade so easily. Zaid found her in the rooftop garden of the safe house, staring out at the lights of the city. "I'm sorry I brought you into this," he said quietly. She didn't look at him. "You didn't. Life did. I just happened to crash into yours." He smiled softly. "You changed mine." Finally she turned. "And what now?" Zaid hesitated. "Now, I ask you something I never thought I'd ask anyone again." She waited. "Stay in my world, not as my assistant, but as my equal. Build something with me." She exhaled, heart pounding. "You don't scare me anymore, Zaid al-Karim." "Good," he said, "because I never wanted to be feared, just seen." 6 months later, Amina walked into the same building where it all began. Only now, her name was on the door. Amina Yusuf, Director of Global Outreach. She had gone from accused to empowered, from outsider to insider, from surviving to leading. And beside her, always, Zaid. The man whose empire had nearly swallowed him whole until he met the one woman who could remind him who he truly was. Not just a billionaire, a man with a purpose. And she? She was never just a woman who crashed her car. She was the reason he rebuilt his entire life.